In the Blackthorn family, power was the only currency that mattered. While Alara slept in chains on a stone floor, her sister Seraphina wore silk and plotted in the shadows. Seraphina thought she was solving a problem, paying off debts, by selling the sister she'd tormented for 10 years to their family's greatest enemy as breeding stock. But she made one catastrophic mistake. She didn't know that the girl she kept in iron shackles was the one woman destined to stand beside the immortal Alpha King. And when he discovers what was done to his mate, kingdoms will burn. Blood will answer for blood. And the sister who sold her will learn that some betrayals echo for eternity. The iron collar burned against Alara's throat as she scrubbed the flagstones of the great hall, her knees aching against the cold stone. The metal was always warm, always tight, a constant reminder that she was less than nothing in Blackthorn Manor. Her hands, raw and cracked from lye soap, moved in practiced circles across the ancient floor while the morning light filtered through broken stained glass windows, casting fractured rainbows across her threadbare servant's dress. She had been doing this for 10 years. 10 years since the fire that killed her parents. 10 years since Seraphina had fastened this cursed collar around her neck and whispered, "It's for your protection, little sister. You're dangerous without it." Alara had believed her then. She'd been only 10 years old, sobbing over the charred remains of the East Wing where mother and father had burned alive. Seraphina had been 17, already beautiful and commanding, and when she'd taken control of the manor with tears streaming down her perfect face, no one had questioned it. The eldest daughter, stepping up in tragedy. How noble. But nobility had rotted away like the manor itself. The tapestries that once depicted the Blackthorn glory now hung in tatters. The marble columns were cracked. Whole wings of the fortress stood empty because Seraphina couldn't afford to heat them. The territory that once stretched to the silver pine forest had shrunk to barely the grounds around the manor. Wolves whispered that the Blackthorn name was dying. Alara knew why. She'd seen the ledgers when she cleaned Seraphina's study. The gambling debts. The loans from the Ironwood pack at crushing interest. The jewelry sold piece by piece. Her sister was bleeding the family fortune dry while Alara slept in the servants' quarters, chained to the wall each night like a dog. The collar pulsed with heat and Alara gasped, pressing her palm against it. It always burned when her emotions ran high, as if something inside her was trying to claw its way out. The manor's healer had examined her once, years ago, and gone pale. "That collar is suppressing something," he'd whispered before Seraphina dismissed him permanently. Alara never learned what he meant. Alara. The voice cut through the hall like a blade of ice. Seraphina stood at the top of the grand staircase, a vision in crimson velvet, her red hair cascading over her shoulders like a river of blood. Her green eyes held no warmth, no recognition that they'd once played together as children, that they'd shared the same womb of their mother's love. Emergency family meeting. My study. Now. Seraphina's smile was serpentine, and something in it made Alara's blood run cold. "I've found a solution to all our problems." The collar burned hotter, and deep inside Alara's chest, something ancient and powerful stirred against its chains, sensing that everything was about to change. Seraphina's study smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Alara stood in the center of the room, still in her stained servant's dress, while her sister sat behind their father's massive oak desk like a queen on a crumbling throne. Parchments covered every surface, and Alara could see the red ink of overdue notices scattered among them. "The Ironwood Pack has called in their debt," Seraphina said without preamble, swirling wine in a crystal goblet. 50,000 gold pieces. Due in 1 week. Alara's stomach dropped. 50,000. That was more than the manor was worth. "I don't have it, obviously." Seraphina's laugh was brittle. "But I've been negotiating. Alpha Ragnar of the Blood Moon Pack has made a generous offer." She paused, savoring the moment. "He's offered 50,000 gold for you. As a breeding slave." The words hit Alara like a physical blow. Her knees nearly buckled. "No." "Yes." Seraphina's smile widened. "He wants Blackthorn blood to strengthen his pack. Apparently our lineage still has value, even if you don't." Ragnar. Every wolf knew that name. The Blood Moon Alpha was legendary for his cruelty, for the way he broke the women sold to him, for the breeding pens where he kept his slaves chained and pregnant until they died. Stories spoke of women who begged for death after just months in his compound. "You can't." Alara's voice cracked. "Seraphina, please. I'm your sister." "Sister?" Seraphina stood, her beautiful face twisting with contempt. "You've been worthless for 10 years. A burden. A drain on resources. At least this way you'll finally have value." She circled the desk like a predator. "You should be grateful. I could have let the Ironwood Pack take you instead. At least Ragnar will keep you alive long enough to breed." Alara's hands trembled. "We're blood. We grew up together. Mother and father. Don't you dare speak of them." Seraphina's shriek echoed off the walls. "You killed them. The cursed child born under the blood moon. The fire started in your nursery. Everyone knows it. You took everything from me, and now you'll finally pay the debt you owe." The collar burned so hot Alara thought it would sear through her skin. "That's not true. I was 10. I didn't." 3 days. Seraphina cut her off coldly. "Ragnar arrives in 3 days to collect his property. Be ready." Alara ran. She didn't think, just turned and fled from the study, down the corridor she'd scrubbed for a decade. She knew every servant passage, every hidden door. If she could reach the forest, maybe she could disappear, become a rogue, anything but submit to Ragnar's breeding pens. She was halfway to the kitchen exit when the guards caught her. Seraphina had anticipated this. They dragged her back, and her sister's face was merciless as she struck Alara across the face, once, twice, until blood filled her mouth. "You will not embarrass me," Seraphina hissed. "Chain her in the cellar. No food until the ceremony." As they threw Alara into the darkness below, the collar pulsed with heat, and something inside her screamed against its prison. The cellar's darkness had weight, pressing down on Alara for 2 days before they came for her. When the guards hauled her up the stone steps, blinking against the light, she barely recognized herself as human anymore. Her body was covered in bruises, her throat raw from screaming into the void, and the collar had burned so continuously that the skin beneath was blistered and weeping. "Clean her up," Seraphina ordered from the top of the stairs, not even looking at her. "Ragnar arrives at sunset. I want her presentable." They dragged Alara to the bathing chambers, a luxury she hadn't experienced since childhood. 3 silent servants scrubbed the grime from her skin with practiced efficiency, their eyes carefully avoiding hers. One of them, an older woman named Martha who had served their mother, whispered as she washed Alara's hair. "I'm sorry, child. So sorry." "Then help me escape," Alara pleaded. Martha's hands stilled. "There's nowhere to run. Ragnar's scouts are watching every road." Her voice dropped even lower. "He wants the Blackthorn bloodline. Says our family once carried the blessing of the moon goddess herself before the curse. He thinks breeding you will bring that power into his pack." The collar flared with heat so intense Alara gasped, nearly fainting into the bathwater. The power inside her was thrashing now, desperate, as if it knew what was coming. They dressed her in white. A simple gown of virgin silk that clung to her too-thin frame, her red gold hair braided with white ribbons. She looked like a sacrifice, and that's exactly what she was. When Alara saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the hollow-eyed girl staring back. "Perfect," Seraphina said, circling her like a merchant inspecting livestock. "Ragnar will be pleased. Remember, you speak only when spoken to. You will thank him for taking you. You will not shame this family any more than you already have." As servants prepared the great hall for the ceremony, Alara caught whispers passing between guards. "The king is in the region," one murmured. "Negotiating border treaties with the Ironwood Pack, just 20 miles north." "King Aldrich himself," another responded. "First time in a century he's left the capital." The name meant nothing to Alara. What were kings to the damned? That night, chained in her old room for the last time, Alara finally slept. And she dreamed. A silver wolf stood on a mountaintop beneath a full moon, her fur glowing like starlight, her eyes liquid mercury. The wolf turned, and Alara felt a recognition so deep it shattered something inside her. This was her. This was what lived beneath the collar. Then another wolf appeared. Massive, black as midnight, with eyes of molten gold. When those eyes found hers, the dream ignited. She felt a pull so powerful, so inevitable, that she woke gasping, the collar smoking against her skin. Tomorrow Ragnar would come. But someone else was coming too. She could feel it in her bones. The grand hall had been transformed into a mockery of ceremony. Torches blazed in sconces that hadn't held fire in years, and Seraphina had dragged out what remained of the family's finery, threadbare banners, tarnished silver, anything to maintain the illusion that the blackthorns still mattered. Alara stood on the dais in her white gown, wrists bound in iron chains, a prize animal waiting for inspection. When the doors opened, she smelled him before she saw him. Blood, steel, and something rancid underneath, the scent of a predator who enjoyed the hunt too much. Alpha Ragnar of the Blood Moon Pack was a mountain of scarred muscle and barely contained violence. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his face a roadmap of old battles, one eye milky white from a wound that should have killed him. His warband followed behind 20 wolves, all bearing the same brutal look, all watching Alara like starving dogs eyeing meat. "Lord Ragnar," Seraphina purred, descending the steps with practiced grace. "Welcome to Blackthorn Manor. As promised, the merchandise is ready for your inspection." Merchandise. The word hung in the air like poison. Ragnar's boots thundered across the flagstones Alara had scrubbed just days before. He mounted the dais without ceremony, circling her slowly, evaluating. His hand shot out and grabbed her face, fingers digging into her jaw, forcing her to meet his dead gaze. "Scrawny," he grunted. "But the bloodline is what matters." His scarred fingers traced the collar, and his ruined eye widened slightly. Suppression iron. What are you hiding, little Blackthorn? Nothing, Seraphina said quickly, too quickly. She's cursed. Unshifted. The collar keeps her stable. Ragnar laughed, a sound like grinding stone. I've broken hundreds of breeding slaves. Cursed or not, she'll serve her purpose. He released Alara's face with a shove. Show me the gold count. Seraphina's steward brought forth the contract and scales. 50,000 gold pieces, already counted and verified by the Ironwood Pack's representative who stood in the corner, ensuring their debt would be paid. The coins glinted in the torchlight as they were stacked on the ancient table, the price of a life measured in metal. The transaction is complete, the Ironwood representative announced. The debt is satisfied. Ragnar reached for Alara's chains, his smile promising years of brutality. His fingers wrapped around the iron links. The doors exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. The ancient oak shattered into splinters, and a wave of power rolled through the hall so intense that every wolf present dropped to one knee involuntarily. All except Ragnar, who merely staggered, and Alara, who couldn't kneel with her chains. A figure stood in the doorway, backlit by moonlight. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing armor of black steel etched with silver runes. As he stepped into the torchlight, Alara's breath stopped. King Aldrich Stormbrown was legend made flesh. Ancient beyond measure, power radiating from him like heat from a forge. His face was carved from granite and shadow, but his eyes were molten gold, and they locked onto Alara with the force of destiny colliding. He froze, completely still, like a wolf scenting something impossible on the wind. And the collar around Alara's throat began to crack. Time fractured. The world narrowed to a single point of connection, golden eyes meeting hers across the smoky hall. Alara felt something inside her chest tear open, not painfully but inevitably, like a door that had been locked her entire life suddenly wrenched from its hinges. The bond snapped into place with the force of lightning striking earth, and she gasped as her wolf, dormant and suppressed for 20 years, threw itself against the collar's prison with a roar that shook her soul. Across the hall, King Aldrich Stormbrown staggered as if struck. His hand flew to his chest, and for a moment, the ancient, immortal Alpha King looked utterly undone. His lips formed a single word, silent but absolute: mate. The collar around Alara's throat ignited with white-hot agony. She screamed, falling to her knees as the iron fought against what was awakening inside her. Silver light began to bleed through the cracks forming in the cursed metal. Aldrich moved. One moment he was at the doorway, the next he was striding across the hall with terrifying purpose, his power making the torches flare and dim. His voice, when it came, was deadly calm, the quiet before annihilation. Remove your hand from my mate. Ragnar still held Alara's chains. He looked between the king and his prize, calculation warring with self-preservation in his dead eyes. I paid for her, he growled. 50,000 gold. The contract is signed. She's mine by law. Aldrich's laugh was arctic. You cannot buy what was always mine. He took another step forward, and the temperature in the hall plummeted. Frost began to form on the ancient stones. You cannot purchase destiny. You cannot own what belongs to the gods themselves. Your Majesty. Seraphina's voice cracked with panic as she rushed forward, finally understanding the magnitude of her mistake. "I didn't know, she's just my sister. There must be some misunderstanding." Silence. The word from Aldrich's mouth was a physical force that sent Seraphina stumbling backward. His eyes never left Alara, drinking her in: the chains, the white gown, the blistered skin around the collar, the hollow cheeks and bruised arms. She watched his expression shift from wonder to comprehension to something far more dangerous. "Rage." "Who?" he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow filled the entire hall. "Put that collar on my mate." The iron around Alara's throat was smoking now, the metal turning red-hot. She could barely breathe, caught between the agony of the collar fighting the bond and the overwhelming pull toward the man, no, the king, who was looking at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. "My sister," Alara managed to gasp out. 10 years ago. After our parents died. Aldrich's head turned slowly toward Seraphina, and the look in those golden eyes promised extinction. Power rolled off him in waves, not the dominance of an alpha, but something older, something that made the very foundations of Blackthorn Manor tremble. "You collared a moon-blessed child," he said softly. "You caged divinity itself. And then you tried to sell her as breeding stock." The collar shattered. Silver light exploded through the grand hall, and Alara's scream became something else entirely, a howl of freedom that had been denied for a decade. Aldrich crossed the remaining distance in 2 strides, his hands already reaching for her. The chains dissolved at his touch, iron links falling away like water, and then his fingers were at the collar, examining the cursed metal with a fury that made the air around him shimmer with heat. "Suppression iron," he breathed, his voice thick with barely contained violence. "Forged with dark magic. This isn't just restraint. This is a cage meant to trap something immense." His golden eyes found hers, and the gentleness in them nearly broke her. "How long?" 10 years, Alara whispered, trembling under his scrutiny. "Since I was 10. After the fire." Seraphina said I was dangerous, that I needed it, You were a child. Each word from Aldrich's mouth was carved from ice and wrath. He turned the collar over, reading runes etched into the inner surface, and his expression darkened impossibly further. This wasn't protection. This was imprisonment. Whoever forged this knew exactly what you were and wanted you powerless. "What am I?" The question tore from Alara's throat. 20 years of not knowing, of being told she was cursed, worthless, a burden. Aldrich's thumb traced the blistered skin of her neck with devastating tenderness. "You're not weak, little mate. You're caged. And I'm going to set you free." "Your Majesty, please." Seraphina's desperate plea was cut short by a growl from Aldrich that made every wolf in the hall bare their throats in submission. "Watch," he commanded the room. "Watch what you tried to destroy." His hand closed around the collar. For a moment, nothing happened. Then silver light began to spiderweb through his fingers, and the metal started to scream, a high-pitched shriek of dark magic being unmade. Aldrich's power poured into the cursed iron, unraveling decade-old spells, breaking enchantments that had cost a fortune in blood and pain to forge. The collar shattered. Not broke, shattered, exploding into 1,000 pieces that dissolved into silver dust before hitting the ground. And Alara screamed. Power erupted from her like a dam breaking, 10 years of suppressed energy detonating all at once. Silver light blazed from her skin, so bright that wolves shielded their eyes, so pure that the darkness in the hall fled to the corners. Her back arched, and she would have fallen if Aldrich hadn't caught her, cradling her against his chest as the transformation began. Her hair lifted in an invisible wind, turning from dull auburn to radiant copper shot through with threads of silver. Her eyes, once plain brown, ignited with mercury light. And on her skin, burning through the white gown like brands of starlight, marks appeared, ancient symbols that hadn't been seen in the world for 300 years. The crescent moon on her forehead, the constellation across her shoulders, the divine script that spiraled down her arms, proclaiming in the old tongue what she was, what she had always been. Moon-blessed, chosen of the goddess, divine blood. Ragnar stumbled backward, his dead eye wide with something close to fear. Impossible. The moon-blessed line died out centuries ago. No, Aldrich said, his voice filled with savage satisfaction as he held his mate close, feeling her power sing against his own. It was hidden, caged, sold like chattel by the very family sworn to protect it. His eyes found Seraphina, who had fallen to her knees, face white as death. And now there will be a reckoning. Alara's legs gave out, the surge of power too much for a body that had been starved and suppressed for a decade. Aldrich caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his armored chest. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, an anchor in the storm of sensation threatening to drown her. Move, he commanded, and Seraphina scrambled out of the way as he carried Alara to the ancient throne, their father's seat, the one Seraphina had claimed for 10 years. Aldrich sat, settling Alara in his lap with a possessiveness that would have been terrifying if it didn't feel so safe. His hand stroked her hair as tremors racked her body. Breathe, little mate. Let it come. The caller suppressed more than just your wolf. He was right. As her power stabilized, something else began to break free memories, locked away behind the same dark magic that had caged her wolf. They hit her in waves, fragmented and terrible. She was 10 years old again, creeping through the manor late at night because she'd heard her mother crying. She paused outside her parents' chambers, watching through a crack in the door as Seraphina, 17 and beautiful, poured something dark and viscous into their evening wine. Her sister's face was calm, calculating, as she whispered words in a language Alara didn't understand, old magic, forbidden magic. No, Alara gasped, the memory sharpening into horrible clarity. She watched her younger self hide as Seraphina left, watched her parents drink the poisoned wine, watched them begin to convulse as the fire started, not in the nursery, but in their chambers, ignited by Seraphina's spell. What do you see? Aldrich's voice was gentle, but his body had gone rigid beneath her. She killed them, Alara whispered, tears streaming down her face. The fire, it was Seraphina. She poisoned them and set the fire to hide it. And then another memory surfaced, this one of Seraphina coming to young Alara's room days later, holding the iron collar, her face a mask of false concern. She said I started the fire with my curse, that I needed the collar to keep everyone safe. But it wasn't for protection. It was to make me forget. To make me believe I was cursed. Your Majesty. A voice cut through the hall, one of Aldrich's royal guard, who had apparently been conducting a very efficient investigation while chaos reigned. We've examined the manor records. Lady Seraphina has been systematically embezzling from the Blackthorn accounts for years. She's sold off nearly 3/4 of the family territory, forged her father's signature on contracts, and he paused, looking at Alara with pity. She's been drawing funds from a trust established for Lady Alara by her mother. 200,000 gold pieces over the past decade. Alara stared at her sister, who was still on her knees, face drained of all color. Every piece fell into place with sickening clarity. The servitude, the chains, the starvation and abuse. All of it designed to keep Alara powerless, to keep her from discovering that she was the rightful heir, that she possessed power Seraphina could never touch. "You stole everything," Alara said, her voice steady despite the tears. "My parents, my childhood, my inheritance, my memories, my very self. And then you tried to sell what was left to a monster." Seraphina's mouth opened, but no lies came. What defense could there be? "I paid for her." Ragnar's roar shattered the heavy silence, his scarred face twisted with rage and something uglier, possessive greed. 50,000 gold for breeding rights. Contract signed, witnessed by Ironwood. The law says she's mine. Aldrich's laugh was dark as midnight. "You want to invoke law? Very well." He stood, setting Alara gently on the throne before turning to face the Blood Moon Alpha. "Challenge combat. Ancient right, older than any contract. You want her? Win her from me. But know this, Ragnar, she is mine by bond, by destiny, by the will of the goddess herself. And I will paint these stones with your blood before I let you touch her again." The hall erupted in whispers. Challenge combat was brutal, often fatal, and rarely invoked except in matters of honor or territory. Ragnar grinned, showing teeth filed to points. "I accept. I've killed alphas twice your." "No." Alara's voice rang out clear and strong as she rose from the throne. The silver marks on her skin were glowing, pulsing with power that grew stronger with each passing moment. "This is not your fight, Aldrich. This is mine." "Little mate," Aldrich began, but she stepped forward, placing a hand on his armored chest. "He wanted to buy me, to breed me, to break me." Her mercury eyes were blazing now. "I will not hide behind my mate while someone who tried to enslave me still draws breath. I fight for myself. You can't even shift." Seraphina's shriek was desperate, hysterical. "You're cursed. You've never transformed. You'll die." Alara turned to her sister slowly, and the smile that curved her lips was not kind. "I was never cursed, Seraphina. You just feared what I would become. You knew that if I ever shifted, if I ever came into my power, you would lose everything. That's why you caged me. That's why you kept me weak." She looked at Ragnar, who was watching with hungry anticipation, already imagining his victory. "Let me show you what you tried to destroy." She closed her eyes and reached inside, to the wolf that had been screaming against its prison for 20 years. The wolf that had been waiting, building strength in the darkness, preparing for this moment. "Come," she whispered. "We are free. Show them what moonblessed means." The transformation was instant and devastating. No painful first shift, no awkward learning. She'd been born for this. Silver light exploded around her as her body changed, bones restructuring, power pouring into new form. When the light faded, a massive wolf stood where Alara had been. She was enormous, easily the size of Aldrich's royal wolf form, her fur pure silver that seemed to glow with inner moonlight. Celestial markings covered her coat, constellations, moons, ancient symbols that moved and shifted across her pelt. Her eyes were liquid mercury, and when she opened her jaws, her teeth gleamed like starlight. The grand hall fell into odd silence. Ragnar shifted, a huge, mottled gray beast covered in scars. He lunged without warning, all brutal strength and savage experience. Elara moved like moonlight on water. She was faster, impossibly graceful, and when their bodies collided, it was Ragnar who went sprawling. Her power wasn't just physical, it was divine. When she struck, silver light crackled from her claws. When she bit, her jaws carried the authority of the goddess herself. The fight lasted less than 3 minutes. Ragnar was experienced, brutal, a killer who had survived countless battles. But Elara was divine. Every instinct she'd never been allowed to develop came flooding through her, centuries of moon-blessed warriors guiding her movements. When Ragnar went for her throat, she twisted impossibly fast and caught his foreleg in her jaws, silver light searing through his flesh. His howl of pain echoed through the hall. She released him, gave him a chance to yield. He lunged again, desperate now, all savage fury. Elara met him midair and drove him into the ancient flagstones with enough force to crack the stone. She stood over him, one massive paw on his chest, her fangs at his throat, and in her eyes he saw his death. "Yield," she commanded, and the word resonated through every mind in the hall, not spoken but felt, the telepathic power of the Moonblessed. "I yield." Ragnar's submission was immediate, absolute. The moment she released him, he scrambled away, shifting back to his human form, naked and bleeding. "Keep your cursed mate. The Blood Moon Pack wants no part of this." He fled, his warband following, leaving 50,000 gold abandoned on the table. Elara turned, still in wolf form, and found Aldrich watching her with unmistakable pride and hunger. Then he shifted, and her breath caught. His wolf was massive, black as obsidian with fur that seemed to absorb light, and those golden eyes blazed like twin suns. The Shadow King, they called him in legends. Now she understood why. They circled each other slowly, two apex predators, two halves of a whole. Silver and shadow, moon and darkness. When they finally came together, touching foreheads in the ancient gesture of recognition, power rippled through the hall, their bond solidifying, two divine bloodlines recognizing each other at last. Elara shifted back, standing naked and unashamed in her marked skin, radiating power. She walked to where Seraphina cowered and looked down at the sister who had stolen everything. "You will answer for murdering our parents," Elara said, her voice carrying the weight of divine judgment. "For 10 years of enslavement. For attempting to sell me into breeding slavery. For every crime you committed while I scrubbed the floors of my own home." The trial was swift. The evidence overwhelming, the confiscated records, the testimony of servants who had lived in terror, the memories now freed from Elara's mind which a truth-seer confirmed. The assembled nobles, who had watched a moon-blessed rise from chains, rendered their verdict with unanimous voices. "Guilty." "Strip her of name and title," Aldrich commanded, now dressed in a robe someone had brought him, standing beside his mate with his hand possessive on her waist. "She is no longer Blackthorn. She is no one." Elara stepped forward, and in her hand was the iron collar, reformed by her power. 10 years you kept me in chains. Now you will understand what you inflicted. She fastened the collar around Seraphina's throat herself. You will serve as I served. You will scrub as I scrubbed. And you will remember, every single day, what you destroyed when you caged a queen. 6 months later, the obsidian palace gleamed with celebration. Queen Alara, the moon-blessed, ruled beside King Aldrich with wisdom and mercy that had already become legendary. The territories prospered. The people loved her. In the palace kitchens, a nameless servant scrubbed pots with raw, bleeding hands, an iron collar tight around her throat. She had once been Seraphina Blackthorn. Now she was nothing, exactly as she had made her sister feel. Alara sometimes walked through the kitchens, and when their eyes met, the former queen would smile, not with cruelty, but with the serene knowledge of justice served. She thought the collar made me weak, Alara would later tell those who asked her story. It only delayed the storm. And when I finally broke free, I didn't need anyone to save me, I became the storm itself. The girl they sold as breeding stock became the queen who could never be bought, sold, or broken again.